I'm Dr. Jo Jorgensen, and I'm running for president because government is too big, too bossy, too nosy, and way too intrusive. And worst of all, it hurts those it tries to help. I'm a mother and a grandmother. I'm an entrepreneur, and I have been a small business owner. I have a PhD in industrial organizational psychology from Clemson and an MBA from SMU. I was invited to join the faculty at Clemson, where I now teach psychology. I cast my first presidential vote ever for Libertarian Ed Clark and had the honor to serve as the vice presidential running mate for the late, great Harry Browne in 1996. Despite the best efforts of recent occupants of the White House, the president is not our king. He or she does not rule by decree, at least not yet. The president cannot unilaterally implement many of the policies we advocate, but there are things a president can do using her authority under the Constitution and the bully pulpit of the presidency. She can bring the troops home. She can use her pardon power to free people convicted of unjust laws. She can submit a balanced budget to Congress without raising taxes and veto spending bills. She can work with Congress to establish a true free market in healthcare. It's not enough for the Libertarian candidate for president to be better than Trump or Biden. Our nominee must be deeply principled with a long-term commitment to our party, be able to communicate libertarian ideas in a way that non-libertarians not only will understand, but will flock to our party. I am that candidate. I ask you for your vote for the Libertarian nomination for president. Thank you.
What would you do in this time of panic over COVID? Has any governor done the right thing? Did the president do something right? What did he do right or wrong? What would you do?
No, I don't think anybody's done anything right. I just want to mention that we've had an assault on our liberty that we haven't seen in our lifetime, both in our personal freedom, being able to leave the house, and also with the economy. So the first thing President Trump should have done is, let me back up a bit. The FDA right now, as since 1962, has to prove, companies have to prove efficacy and safety. Before 1962, they only had to show safety, that their drugs were safe. So what happened was we had about 60 American companies that were making testing kits, and the FDA only approved 2 of them. So what the president should have done was had an Emergency Powers Act and said, okay, for the FDA, you only have to prove safety. You don't have to prove efficacy. We need to get these kits out there.
And anybody with a kit could just sell it?
Well, first of all, we need the free market to weed out who's good and who's bad. You know, before 1962, drugs that were put out on the market were typically gone within a few months because they didn't work and people saw through it right away. If you are a large drug company, and then you don't want to put out either a testing kit or a drug that doesn't work because you'll go bankrupt. And that's what should happen. If you don't give people the best quality, the best quantity, then you should go bankrupt. Now, I admit right now we have a problem with the federal bailouts in that somebody could put out a testing kit that didn't work. But if I were president, I would let the company go under. If you put out a drug or a testing kit that doesn't work, you don't deserve to be in business.
Joe, what parts of the federal government would you keep, if any?
Well, that's a good question. I think most libertarians would agree that police, courts, and military would be a good place to start. Would you mind if I expanded on the charity question?
Go for it.
Okay, because I am a scientist. I need to see hard data, and I think American voters need to see hard data too. I don't think we can just give them glib answers of liberty and freedom. I think they need to actually see it to believe it. So the first thing I would point out is that poverty was going down in the United States in the beginning of the 1900s until we got to the war on poverty. And then we put the war on poverty into place. And once again, government does not do a good job and it slows it down. And a lot of people are critical and they say, well, but it kept going down. Well, that's because the programs weren't implemented for years. And I really like to explain, as you know, I'm a teacher, and I like to explain concepts through stories and examples. And one of my favorite charity examples is that of the United Way in the early 90s. So in the early 90s, there was a big scandal because the president of the United Way spent something like $400,000 on artwork. And by the way, that'd be closer to $1 million now. So what happened? Donors stopped donating. They said, we don't want the money to go to your artwork. We want it to go to poor people who need help. So donations went down. So United Way had to clean up their act to continue to get donations. Now, if you look at the federal government, if you give money to the federal government to help people and they do a lousy job, what do? They just raise taxes. There's nothing there. They're not held accountable. So that's why the private market works best. And I agree that there aren't enough charities out there right now. We can't just cut off the spigot like that. My plan for Social Security is to have an immediate opt-out on day one. Now, of course, you need Congress to help, but if I had a magic wand, on the first day in office, nobody would ever put another dime into Social Security again. But here's the problem. We've got 12 million people who are dependent solely on Social Security. And I agree with you, will agree with your question. What about the people who don't have kids? So what I would do is, we all know that their Social Security was not put into the lockbox that we were promised. It was spent on government assets and other things with the government. So what I would do is I would sell those government assets, things like mineral rights, water rights, buildings downtown, and I would take that money and I would fund the people who are in the 50s, 60s, 70s, who were forced, literally at the point of a gun, to put their money into the inefficient Ponzi scheme put up by the government, and I would give them their money back that they put in.
What about the national security state? Do you support that, as he accuses you of?
Well, again, police, courts, and military, absolutely, I'm for military. Do I think that we need some type of intelligence within the military? Absolutely. Absolutely, we need somebody going to other countries and looking around. I don't want to just have one of our submarines blasted out of the water without us knowing it. If we had good intelligence, we would find out about the virus ahead of time, about Wuhan. But the thing is the CIA is, with all the black ops and all the assassinations, and I don't think the CIA can be reformed. And I thought I was pretty clear when I said I want the intelligence function of the CIA to be rolled into the military. I don't want the CIA itself. It is way past, it just can't, it can't be rehabilitated. But I don't understand how you can have a country and a military without some kind of intelligence.
What would your policy be? President Trump says, build the wall.
My policy is that of the Libertarian Party. In fact, my campaign is straight down the platform, plank by plank. So I would open up the borders. And I realize that there's a lot of misinformation out there. What will happen is the media will get a hold of, let's say, one immigrant who has a DUI or has killed somebody, and then they'll say, well, that should be the case for everybody. If you look at the statistics, and again, I'm a scientist, I go by data. If you look at the statistics, people born on American soil actually commit more crimes than people born on foreign soil after they're in our country. And also, if you look at the people who are admitted to the country, it actually helps our economy. It doesn't hurt it. It actually makes the economy more vibrant. And it's just really nice to blend in different cultures. Oh, and one last thing. I am the grandchild of 3 immigrants.
All true what you said about immigration, but today some people want to come here to freeload and some people want to come here to murder us. So don't we need border controls?
Well, first of all, as far as the freeloading, a lot of people don't realize that we already have safeguards on some of our programs, that they're not allowed to access several programs for 5 years. And as far as murdering us, I mean, if the chances of being hurt by a terrorist are like worse than being hit by lightning. So, and as far as the average person, I'm not sure that, well, like I just said, crime is actually lower for people born on foreign soil than for people born on American soil. So when somebody says people want to cross the border to murder us, that just doesn't hold water.
You've been accused of supporting the welfare state. Trump said when he signed the $2 trillion stimulus. This will deliver urgently needed relief to our nation's families and workers. You wouldn't have done that? You would have?
Absolutely not, because the money has to come from somewhere. So rather than having people send the money to the government, have the government, go through the expensive middleman, as we say, and give it to certain companies or certain individuals, I say let the people keep their money. Let them decide who should stay in business and who shouldn't. Usually, bureaucrats do a poor job of deciding where the money goes. The money usually goes to their friends and special interests and lobbies, whereas the people who will spend their money, as Milton Friedman said, vote with your dollars, vote with your feet. They will spend money on the companies who give them the best quality that they want at the best price. And may I bring up something else here?
Go for it.
Okay.
Yes.
First of all, I got the impression that Jacob thought he was disagreeing with me on immigration. I believe we are identical on our immigration. When we talk about immigration, yes, we did have open borders until the 1920s, virtually open borders, which is when my grandparents came over, slightly before then. So I agree with the party platform. And also, Jacob dodged your question about the environment. If you're still looking for an answer, I'll be happy to give it to you.
Please give it to me. How are we going to keep the air clean when I have no incentive to not pollute my neighbor's air?
Well, that's the problem, is the government has even less incentive to keep the air clean. Once again, they give out special favors. If you look at a globe, then wherever there's bigger government, there's more pollution. Where there's less government, there's less pollution. And we need to hold people accountable. Again, I like to explain voters by giving examples that they can understand and that will persuade them. So for instance, a lot of people looked at the Gulf oil spill and they said, well, see, we need, greedy corporations. We need government to rein them in. But here's the thing. If it were a free market, that company would have had to get insurance. And either the insurance company would have said, well, this is too dangerous. It's too likely you're going to have a spill, so we're not going to insure you. Or the insurance company would have made regular visits to make sure it was safe. But what had actually happened was the government placed a cap on basically what they owed the public. And that's wrong. People need to be held accountable anytime they mess up the environment. And right now, the government is just letting people get off scot-free.
Let's just quickly do a couple lightning rounds on another subject, starting with you, Joe. Would you legalize marijuana?
Legalize everything.
What's government's role in terms of education? Should there be a Department of Education?
There should absolutely not be a Department of Education. It was put in about 40 years ago, and education has not improved. In fact, if anything, it's gone down. And right now, if you look at all of the different fights we have, I'd like to point out that right now, voters pay attention to voting because they have to. And I look at voting libertarian as basically self-defense. So if you want to pick out, let's say, what kind of school your kid goes to, whether there's uniforms, whether they have to cut your hair or have religion or say the Pledge of Allegiance and all that, you have to go vote for that. It would be much better to let parents, teachers, and students decide which schools to go to rather than having government give a one-size-fits-all. One-size-fits-all rarely fits anyone.
What cabinet departments would you keep?
Well, I do want military.
Defense.
Yes.
State.
I do want defense. Here's the thing. We need to become less involved in other people's affairs. So I don't want the job of going around and talking to other countries and making nice to them and asking them to not build nuclear weapons. And besides, people have already learned from us, hey, if you're nice to us and you do what we say, sometimes we'll assassinate you and get out of office. So what I want is free, open borders. Here's one of my favorite stories. In the early 80s, I had a Fiat Spitfire. And I was parking my car at a grocery store, and an older gentleman came up, and he had this scowl on his face, which I couldn't understand because I didn't think I'd cut anybody off. But he came over, took a look at my car, and said, "Why are you driving an Italian car?" It turns out he was a World War II veteran. And I didn't want to get into a debate or an argument with him since he did serve our country. But the point is, Italy is not going to bomb us if we're buying their cars. Japan is not going to bomb us if we're buying Toyotas. So what we need to do is just trade peacefully with people, and we'll see a lot of these other problems disappear.
Do you say sex work should be kept illegal?
Of course not. Like some people have said, prostitution is basically capitalism and sex. Which of those two are you against? I'm for both. I propose bold libertarian solutions that Americans can understand and that they can learn to love. As president, I will downsize the federal government so we can end deficit spending and end the income tax. Each American family will get back, on average, about $12,000 a year. I will make America one giant Switzerland, armed and neutral. Finally, we'll be at peace. I will work for a truly competitive market in healthcare, innovative, safe, high quality, low cost, and affordable. I will pardon and free prisoners convicted of so-called crimes without a victim. Please vote for me for the presidential nomination and visit joj2020.com and join my campaign. Thank you.